Hi, hey, hello. I am Unapologetically Heather, here to empower and inspire. Welcome to another episode of Unapologetically Heather, Raw and Rising, the podcast where we get real about the raw, the unfiltered stories behind entrepreneurship and personal growth. This month, we're diving into the topic of turning setbacks into comebacks. Every episode will bring you stories that highlight resilience, perseverance, and the beauty of rising from challenges. I am super ecstatic to be joined today by Jennie Hayes. She is a trailblazer in mindset. Jennie has a powerful story that ties perfectly into our theme this month of turning setbacks into comeback. Before we dive into the story, let's get to know her a little bit better. So, Jennie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for inviting me to co-host. This is going to be so much fun today. So I am happily married for 15 years to the love of my life. We have 4 dogs now, long story, 2 cats and 3 chickens, and then a robot, Astro, who's a lot of fun. I love music. I led worship for a few years. I'm a paramedic by trade and constantly learning, constantly pushing, just constantly growing.
And so we're going to be a little fun with this too. Tell us one fun or unexpected fact that people wouldn't find about you on social media.
Oh, well, that's easy because I'm not very good at sharing things on social media. So I would say one thing that people don't know about me that's kind of fun. Well, that would be on social media, though, that I love to fish and the coastline. So maybe the fact that my husband and I love to play Super Mario Brothers together. And in fact, over Thanksgiving this last year, we spent 5 days sitting on our butts playing Super Mario together and had a blast.
That is awesome. That sounds like super fun. My brother and I used to play Super Mario's Brothers whenever I was younger. I used to love that game. Mario Kart, when they brought the N64 out, like that was one of my favorite things to do was play Mario Kart. I used to kick my brother's butt all the time. It was the only game I ever won at.
We haven't tried Mario Kart yet. He really likes the traditional one. And so we've been playing with all the new versions of the traditional, and it gets pretty silly.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, Jennie, this month's theme is all about setbacks and comebacks. I'm super excited. So, for those of you that are new tuning in, the reason why this podcast is a little bit different than the rest is because I have absolutely no idea what story Jennie is going to share. So, we're going to dive in this together and we're going to be real and we're going to be raw and vulnerable with people. So, let's go, Jennie.
All right. So yeah, when we first started talking about being on this and we were talking about the subject of setbacks to comebacks, it really truly is, I mean, my goodness, I could have come up with like 18 different stories because I'm one of those women that's really a survivor, and so many of us are. We have so many things in our life that happen over and over again that could take us out, could end us, could ruin our lives, could, from the divorce to the moving to the loss of jobs to things like that. But the story that I want to share with you is my most inspirational story. And it's led me to where I am today and what I do today. So back in 2014, I was diagnosed with insulin resistance. Being the good learner and investigator, I dug into how do I fix this, figured it out, had all these women coming with me because I was just giving away information and sharing my heart, and decided that's it. I need to coach women around insulin resistance. So I jumped feet first into business and nothing happened. Well, I was taking the courses, I was paying the coaches, I was doing all the things except those things that, when they say, make the list of 25 people and reach out. Get on Facebook and start messaging people. Share things on social media. Go on podcasts. Network. It was like my brain was like, if I just am here and I've got the answers, people will come to me. Because I couldn't get past that. And we all have something in our life that keeps us stuck, right? So after a while, my husband, after 3 years, when I'd made $267 in my business, my husband comes to me and says, you're going to have to get a job. And I kicked and I cried and I screamed. I was like, no, I don't want to do this. I have to give up on my dream if I do that. Fell into a wonderful company that helps therapists to grow and scale their businesses. And they taught me a technique called brain spotting. So I start using this technique. Now, what is brain spotting? Basically, we take those things that keep you stuck and we move you through it super fast, sometimes in one session. And it's beyond, that's why I call it beyond mindset. It's beyond mindset. It's actually a somatic technique that connects your body to your brain. And so those icky feelings just don't exist anymore. It's crazy. And so I'm doing this with them, and I'm still trying to chip away at my business, still not marketing, but still wondering why nothing's happening. Isn't it crazy? We all do that. And I finally had a session of my own around my business because I was ready to hang up my hat. I was done. I was like, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me, because in my mind, I kept saying, I'm doing the things. But yet when I interviewed my last coach for insulin resistance, I typed into the conversation. I was like, do I have to reach out to 50 people I know to tell them what I'm doing? I was afraid of being seen, plain and simple. So I go into this brain spotting session, and it's crazy because the realization was just really, okay, let's make a business that fits who you are and market in a way that aligns with who you are. Doesn't seem like a huge revelation. Changed my business completely, because now I'm doing brain spotting for business. And as you can see, I'm on a podcast. I'm networking. I am loving networking. And my business today, 6 months in, has made more than I made in my first 4 years in my last business.
Wow. That's amazing. So for those people out there who don't know, what is insulin resistance?
Okay. So insulin resistance is early diabetes. That's the fastest way to say it.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So I want to point out something that you said, because it has been a huge part of my own journey. I dealt a lot last year with imposter syndrome. So for those who don't know, I own an insurance agency. I know everybody hates insurance right now.
No.
But I've been in the insurance industry for 8 years now, and I was forced to mature very fast because I didn't have a mentor. So everything I knew, everything I learned it all on my own. And in doing all of that, I have gotten to a place now where I've owned my agency for almost 3 years, and also starting a brand new podcast, and really stepping into 2025 as authentically myself. I have several stories to share, and I have some great insight, I think, for other entrepreneurs who may be in that stuck position. But you said something that is so important, and I want to drive that home for people, which is you were afraid to be seen. I think that we all go through that. And I think that on several different levels, it's not about being afraid to be seen. That's a very small piece of it. The larger piece of it is that you're afraid that people are going to see you, and then they're going to be looking to you to answer questions. They're going to start asking things that you're like, oh my gosh, I have to answer these questions. Wait a minute. I'm not experienced enough. I don't know enough. What if I don't know the answers to these questions? Who cares? Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the main idea. Who cares? We are literally all on this entrepreneurial journey together. And for those even that are, millions and billions of followers, big influencers that they started out at the bottom or they had some really traumatic things happen to them, they all will still tell you they're still learning as they go. That we are literally all on the same journey together. And so I would love to hear your takeaways from, what you've learned over the course of growing out of or stepping out of your comfort zone and not being afraid to be seen anymore.
Yeah, I think a big piece of my fear of being seen was because, I led worship for 5 years. I'm a singer. It's not about that outward exposure as much as it is that inward exposure, because entrepreneurship takes you to a new level of being authentic. Like you said, unapologetically yourself. And that was the piece that I was afraid to open up. And as we know, or at least as we realize as we continue in business and figure it out, that's the piece people want to see, to become clients, to become partners, to work with you. And so, the journey for me has been night and day, because I finally realized that I've always known there's going to be people that like me and people that don't, but then it was okay to have that in public also.
Right. Well, and I think another really important aspect of this is that you said, people aren't going to like me, and that's okay. Listen,
Yeah.
well, I think one of the biggest epiphanies that I've had as an entrepreneur in my, running 5 businesses and being a mother and being a military spouse is that I'm not for everybody. And that's all right, because there are people out there that I am for. And that is the biggest compliment that you will ever get, is to authentically be who you are and not apologize for that and attract those people in the universe that those are your people. There will be more of them than not of them.
Right. And it was a huge growth point for me the day that I realized. So, I'm sure with insurance, you have some borders that you have to stay within. But as a coach, I literally have over 7 billion people that technically I could work with. From 7 billion, room for about 15. Why am I worried about competition? Why am I worried about people seeing me and not liking me? I'm going to find 15 people that like me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and you will probably find way more than that.
Yeah.
You will probably find way more than that. And, we're in an age of social media and being present on the internet. And, that comes with the good and the bad.
And the bad.
And the ugly, right?
Yeah.
And everything in between. Again, I think that, and I think your purpose is that you help people to shift that mindset and beyond that from a terrified, right? Because we're all terrified when we first become entrepreneurs.
Yes.
But that terrified self-doubt to let me be who I am and watch the growth and embrace the tragedy along the way, because it's not all bad, but there is some bad stuff.
There is some bad stuff. And I always say that the best self-growth program you could ever enroll in is entrepreneurship, because you learn so much about yourself. You learn how to take those highs and those lows. And you were talking about the mindset. And the reason that I call it beyond mindset with the brain spotting is that a lot of times we're doing mindset stuff. I mean, you've been told by somebody, either online, a mentor, family member, pastor, teacher, if you feel it and push through it, or, tell yourself the truth. Don't tell yourself the lies about it. Keep, positive affirmations, meditation, da-da-da-da-da. But the problem is that sometimes those things don't work, or they don't work very quickly. They can take years to work. And one of the things I really like about somatic work, which is what brain spotting is a piece of, somatic means in the body, is that we're actually dealing with the feeling that's keeping you from doing, instead of trying to rationalize or prove our brain out of it. We actually just kind of short circuit the whole protective thing that our brain's doing. Because what's doing, it's just trying to protect you. It says, no. You're going to be unhappy because people are going to say nasty things. But the thing is again, if we can get past the emotion tied to it, does it matter?
Yeah. So, and I want to ask you, in this journey, you said that you have been through a couple of different things and you thought of a bunch of different stories. And so I only know this because of your request form, but you used to be a 911 dispatcher?
No, I was a paramedic in 911.
Oh, paramedic. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that, because I feel like that had to have had a little bit of influence into your insight, but also your perception of the world now, being a paramedic and seeing probably some pretty crazy things.
Yeah, I have to say that the journey through paramedicine, first of all, it gave me a lot of ability to stand on my own, but it also gave me a huge case of imposter syndrome, because in that world, everybody has to be the best. If you're not the best, then you're not. And so, I remember sitting there looking at things going, oh my gosh, if they knew that I have to stop and look at notes to figure out how to make this calculation at 2 a.m. in the morning, they would judge me. And it's like, it's 2 a.m. I should look at my notes. That's smart, kind of things. But it was just constant. It was like, oh, gee, I missed that IV. And if I'd only been better, that would have, I would have gotten it. It didn't change the outcome. Or, there were so many things over and over and over again that were little. It was like, well, you should have been better. You should have done better. You should have known better. And then you throw in the management who still has that same mindset. And now you've got them saying, well, this is what I would have done. So you should have done what I would have done. And when you have 8 different people telling you that, there's 8 different things you should have done. So yeah, it definitely built a feeling around that I was expected to understand and predict what other people wanted while trying to balance that with doing what the patient needed. And it actually made me quite bitter, to be quite honest. Yeah. Not to mention that, but there was so much abuse of the system that I did not like myself when I left EMS.
Yeah.
And I would say, oh, go ahead.
How long did you do that for?
10 years.
Okay. Oh, wow. So probably, a good chunk of, is it the longest career that you've had?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And I still keep my certification. I'm not practicing, and I don't think you could pay me enough to go back and do it, but I work too hard for my license. I'm not getting rid of it.
Right. I feel that because all the licenses I've gotten and still working on some more. And I'm like, listen, even if I never do this ever again, I'm keeping these licenses because I worked hard for this.
Right.
I'm not letting it go.
Yeah. So it definitely influenced me. Another thing that it did is it really gave me an appreciation of who I am, because so many paramedics are trauma. Oh my gosh, give me the trauma patient. They wanted to go in and deal with that patient. And I was the medicine patient. I was the psych patient. I was the person that needed that extra touch. And so it was funny because when we would have a psych patient or someone that was having a heart attack, or it was always, well, you want to take this one, right? I was like, yes. The worst thing to me in the world was a patient that couldn't talk to me and tell me what was going on. And it also taught me how to read between the lines, because a lot of times in an emergency situation, people don't tell you the whole story. Either they can't because they're focused on one piece of it and you're trying to pull things out of them, or they're trying to hide piece of it because they're afraid you'll judge them. And it really has helped with the brain spotting and coaching just in general, because I'm listening to what you're not saying as well as what you're saying.
And again, going back to that, being afraid to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
Ordinary people, and we say ordinary, right? Who's really ordinary? But ordinary people with, no ambitions on being entrepreneurs, who just are trying to live their lives afraid of being seen, because we are afraid that people will judge us for who we authentically are. And a lot of these people who have mental health issues, or they have, psychological issues, they don't have any control over this. They didn't ask for these things, right? We didn't wake up one day and say, hey, let me have schizophrenia. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually found that the people that were trying to hide the most were the people that were in situations that they might have had some control over. Domestic abuse, violence in these situations. And there was a lot of shame. And the problem with shame is that it keeps us from being seen. So we never get out of shame. My first marriage was to a man who cheated on me, apparently since we were dating. I didn't find that out till after we were divorced, but it was multiple times. But the thing is I had to keep a face about me. I had to pretend like this never happened because it made me a horrible person. Now I know it didn't make me a horrible person. He was just a piece of work.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Because Jeffrey's a little bit different.
Well, he did have some mental disorders that, looking back now, I can see it's like, okay, I made choices and I put myself in that situation. The beautiful piece of that is that now I can see that in other people and help them to make better choices.
So I love that. And we actually are pretty similar in that, for those who don't know, this is my third marriage. I was married and divorced when I was very, very young. But then I also kind of lost my mind in my 20s. I think a lot of us have been there. And in that, my late 20s, I ended up getting married. I started on social media, dating apps, and all the things. Anyways, found a husband within 10 months. I had moved almost 3 hours away from my parents. And that's when the switch flipped. And it was like, he was somebody totally different. And it was nothing I ever did was good enough. And nothing I ever said was good enough. And I didn't cook dinner the best I could. I didn't take care of the kids the best that I could, even though neither one of these kids were his. I didn't do the laundry the right way. It wasn't folded fast enough. For those of you who don't know me, I hate laundry. I will wash and dry them all day, but folding them 5 to 7 business days, ma'am. And you'll be lucky if they're not still sitting in the dryer at that point. But, for me, it was the shame. And you're right. It was the shame of, I'm not good enough. At this point, that was my second marriage, and it was failing. And to me, I was trying to figure out what is wrong with me. Why do I always do this to myself, but why am I doing this to other people? And when I started asking these questions and got into a community of women that started talking about domestic violence and things like that, it was like mental and emotional abuse is still abuse.
Still abuse.
Even though they never put their hands on you, it's still abuse. Because it does things too. And this is going to be very controversial when I say this, but I tell people this a lot. I feel like when someone hits you, those scars, sometimes they stay, but a lot of that stuff goes away. The bruises go away. The redness goes away. The pain goes away physically, right? But the emotional and the mental stuff, that never goes away.
Right.
It never goes away. And you carry that with you for the rest of your life. And therapy can help. And you can find some coping mechanisms. But at the end of the day, you will always have triggers that they will be very sensitive to you. And you have to figure out what it is about yourself that this is not me. I didn't do this. I didn't make him say these things to me. I didn't make him mean. I didn't make him a narcissist. I didn't make him blame everything on me. That was to him. He made those decisions.
Right.
And so for me, that was one of the huge turning points in my life, was like the rise and fall of this marriage. But I also found out he had been having an affair with a college student the entire year that we were married. Like, what?
Yeah. Now I have some good news for you. So you don't know, like you said, you don't know my story. You don't know really a lot about what I do. But you said something that was really stood out to me, is that those emotions stay with you forever. Therapy can help. I would say that brain spotting actually can eradicate the emotions and move that memory into long-term storage. So the emotion actually, you can do the long road, which is what everybody does. Everybody does that, right? We do the long road where we learn to, first we stuff it down. Then it's like, okay, I can deal with it a little bit. Okay, I can refocus it. I can move it. But then it still pops up every once in a while. Like your husband will say something wrong. He'll say something about the laundry and you lose it. And it's not at your husband. It's at the old husband. It's at your shame, right? But brain spotting can take that and take that trigger away. And that's one of the reasons I absolutely love it, is because it is so freaking powerful. And it's crazy. And nobody, I mean, you don't believe it till you've seen it, but it really does. Right. Yeah. It really does. And
is that similar to, or does it have some similar characteristics to like EMDR?
It is basically the child of EMDR. So with EMDR, for those that don't know, it's a therapy where they use eye movements to help connect the two sides of the brain. And it does help move things into long-term storage. It helps your brain process things. Well, brain spotting is kind of next generation. They say EMDR is gold standard for PTSD, which is what you're describing, post-traumatic stress disorder. I would argue that brain spotting is platinum standard, because when they look at PTSD studies for people who've been in war, who've been assaulted, both regular assaults and SA, that takes for EMDR, it takes between 30 and 60 sessions to clear the emotion. And sometimes things are still left. Brain spotting, for those serious ones, 16 to 30. Half of the time. And
That's really
things,
interesting.
I don't want to say imposter syndrome is simple compared to that. But when you're talking about having been abused versus the imposter syndrome, we can usually do it in 3 sessions max. Usually it's 1 session. So it's as groundbreaking to me as the day I learned that you can use diet to get rid of schizophrenia, which is just unheard of.
Yeah.
And brain spotting is just as revolutionary as that, which is why it blows my mind. And I get to see it every time I do a brain spotting session. Just is amazing. I just love it.
Yeah. So I actually have been, that's the reason why I asked, is because I actually am doing EMDR, and it was something I had never heard of until a friend of mine, long story short, my past marriage just kind of bled into everything in my life. And even after the rise and fall of that was kind of like the huge turning point in my life, or the beginning of it. And there are some things that other people don't know about me that I'm sure at some point in this podcast I'll share. But I carried those things again into relationships, into my friendships, into my relationships with my family members, and also into my work life.
Sure.
And so working for someone who, doesn't matter where you work for, if it's corporate America or, small business or whatever, but working for someone who also has narcissistic tendencies, it literally was like, holy crap, what is going on? And that was kind of like the descent into the depression, because I have anxiety and depression result of my last marriage, or it was amplified during my last marriage. And I was diagnosed with PTSD July of last year. And so I started EMDR, and that's kind of what we worked on. It has helped me leap and bounce. I'm still mind blown a lot of times when I'm sitting in my therapist's office and I'm like, word vomit, just throw up everything, right? And the counselor, the therapist, is like, holy crap, when you came into my office 6 months ago, you were not processing things like this.
Right.
And it teaches you how to reprocess the brain to cope with certain things, but also to let them know that these bad things don't define who you are. They're a very small part of your story, and they somehow, at some point, they become somebody else's survival guide.
Yeah, and your brain is just trying to protect you. That's really all it's trying to do. And we have to allow it to know that, you know what, I don't need protection from this anymore. Yeah, one of the things that separates the brain spotting from the EMDR is the focus. So EMDR is very general. It's like, where are we at today? What's bubbling up? What's coming up?
Yeah.
Brain spotting, what we would do is say, okay, that thing that you had with your husband the other day it really is bothering you. Let's focus in on that emotion. We don't have to go back to the old memories. It just processes them based on the emotion, the reaction that you had today. And so for people who are afraid to remember those old memories, it can be super powerful because you don't have to.
That's incredible. I've never heard of this before. That's amazing. I mean, that is amazing, especially like you said, for people who have been through really traumatic things, whether it's, SA related or domestic, in relationship. That is a very powerful thing to be able to use and never have to ask a patient or a victim to be the victim all over again.
Right. You don't have to put yourself back in the story if you don't want to.
Right. That's incredible. So I have one last question that I want to ask you. So in this journey, through all the different roles you've played in life and all the hats you've worn and all the experiences that you have been through and the journey you're still on, what is the thing that surprised you the most about yourself so far?
I think the thing that surprises me most actually is the fact that I wasn't comfortable with being myself for so many years. I mean, I remember very distinctly, I was a military brat growing up. And so for anybody who isn't a military brat, you don't know that you have to have a certain presentation everywhere you go. I mean, literally, if I was in public and was misbehaving, my dad could get in trouble.
Yep.
He could get disciplined for it.
I
Right?
approve this message.
Right. And so I learned to always put on this mask and always be what people expected. Well, I remember very distinctly being in my bedroom when I was 16 years old saying, I'm tired of the masks. I want to take them off. And yet it took me another years to actually,
We don't edit these, so.
no, it took me, not centuries, but decades to really understand what taking the mask off meant. I would still put a mask on every day because I thought that's what the world needed to see. And so I think for me, just that change of finally being able to take the mask off and be who I really am has been the most moving, the biggest and deepest piece of my journey.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I want to ask, what is one piece of encouragement, advice, or wisdom that you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, I'm going to steal and I'm going to give them two.
Do it.
So the first one is you're not broken. You're not. Your body and your brain are doing exactly what they need to do, exactly what they think they need to do to protect you. Doesn't mean that it's the right thing necessarily, but it's okay. It's not because of you doing something wrong. And number two, the best thing in the world that you can learn to do from this moment going forward is to feel your feelings. When you get mad, when you get sad, when you are happy, anything that comes up, take a moment to actually acknowledge and feel the sensation. That is going to help from creating some of these time capsules, like the traumatic history that leaves. And so you can't use that to undo the old necessarily, but you can prevent more damage by feeling what's going on and allowing your brain to process it without fear.
Feel the feelings. I'm here
Feel
for
the
that.
feelings.
Feel the
Through,
feelings.
not around.
Right. And don't be ashamed of feeling the feelings and feeling how you feel.
Right.
Your feelings are validated. This is not a race to see whose feelings are more traumatic. Like, this is your feelings and you're allowed to feel those things, even if they're not warranted. It's okay. Who cares? At the end of the day, feel them to be what they are.
And they won't last very long. If you will feel them, they will go away. It's when we repress them and push them down that they last for so long.
Right. Well, we are coming to the end of our show today. I'm so sad because I feel like we could just talk forever.
Yeah, it's like, can't we do this like 2 or 3 more times?
Yes. So I really want to say thank you so much for co-hosting with me today and sharing your story and inspiring all of us, not just the listeners today, but I'm inspired by your story. It's been a privilege to have you on the podcast. Before we sign off, if someone wants to connect with you, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about what you're doing, what you're getting into in 2025, how to connect with you?
The best place to find me is either to check out my website, which is just jenniehays.com. Make sure you spell it with IE and there's no E in the Hayes. But you can also find me on Facebook at Jennie's Health Solution, LinkedIn, it's just Jennie Hays, or you can email me directly, jennie@jenniehays.com. I'm not one of those people that sell. I love to have conversations just like this. I love to figure out what's going on and give you tools to get through it. It just makes me happy.
Awesome. So that's it for today's episode of Unapologetically Heather, Raw and Rising. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope that you found as much inspiration in Jennie's story as I did. Don't forget to follow the podcast, our Instagram, and our Facebook for more raw, unfiltered stories, and I'll see you next time. Until then, keep it real, stay rising, and never apologize for being you. Catch you guys later.